The first time I saw him, he wasn't watering the plants, he was whispering to them, his voice low and rhythmic like a forgotten lullaby, and the impossible happened. The wilted roses lifted their drooping heads, their petals unfurling in brilliant red right in front of my eyes as if they were obeying him, as if he were the one giving them life, and in that moment I froze on my porch steps, unable to understand whether I was witnessing a trick of light, a hallucination, or something supernatural woven quietly into the perfect neatness of our HOA community. But the more I stared, the more the world around me seemed to dissolve until all I could see was him, this tall, calm, mysterious gardener with sun-browned skin, dark hair falling over his forehead, and hands that moved through leaves like the wind itself listened to him. And when he suddenly looked up and our eyes met, time felt like it stretched thin, suspended between us, because there was something in his gaze, an old sadness, a secret fear, and a softness that didn't belong to a stranger who made flowers bloom by accident, and I didn't know why, but I felt his fear wasn't of me but for me, as if my witnessing his magic had put me in danger, and before I could blink he straightened, dropped the rose stem he was holding, and stepped back like I had caught him doing something forbidden, something deadly, something that the HOA wouldn't want anyone to see, which made absolutely no sense because he was just a gardener, right? Just someone hired to trim hedges, pull weeds, maintain the fake perfection of our immaculate neighborhood. Yet the way he tensed, the way his throat tightened, the way the wind suddenly picked up around him like the world was reacting to his fear, made me take a step forward without thinking, drawn toward the mystery clinging to him like the scent of the blooming roses that had come alive under his touch. And I didn't even realize I had left my porch until my flip-flops were brushing the fresh mulch and he whispered sharply, "Stop," with such urgency that my heart jolted and my breath hitched. And though his voice was gentle, there was something ancient underneath it, something tired and warning and weighted with the kind of knowledge only someone who has lived with a secret for too long understands. And I wanted to ask him how he did that, how he made the roses bloom, how he made the vines twist toward him like they were greeting an old friend. But before I could speak, a golf cart rolled by, the HOA president's cart, and the gardener instantly stepped away from the flowers, grabbing regular tools, pretending to do normal gardening, pretending he was just a guy trimming bushes instead of someone who could coax life out of dying plants with nothing but his breath and his voice. And the shift was so sudden, so desperate, so terrified that I knew deep in my bones this wasn't something he wanted anyone else to know, least of all the HOA, and I found myself backing away slowly as the cart passed, my mind racing, my heart pounding, because what I had just seen wasn't natural, wasn't normal, wasn't even explainable by any logic I understood. Yet instead of fear I felt an overwhelming pull, a curiosity that crackled like electricity under my skin, as if the blooming roses had reached inside me and planted something new there, something alive and insistent, something that whispered, "I need to know who he is, what he is, and why he hides his power." But when the cart disappeared and I looked back at him, he was staring at me with a quiet plea in his eyes, a plea that said I should forget what I saw because remembering it might cost me more than I could imagine. Yet even then I knew I would never forget the moment the roses bloomed at his whisper. I couldn't stop thinking about him that night, replaying the moment the roses bloomed as if my mind feared losing even a single detail. And the more I remembered the scene, the whisper, the petals rising, the fear in his eyes, the more I felt pulled toward him like something inside me had been waiting for that moment without ever knowing why. So the next morning I found myself wandering outside earlier than usual, pretending to check my mailbox while actually searching for the mysterious gardener, and when I finally saw him near the community fountain brushing fallen leaves away with slow, careful motions, he looked different in the daylight, quiet, guarded, almost fragile beneath the glow of the sun. But the plants around him still reacted, their stems subtly lifting, their colors warming as if grateful for his presence, and I approached him before I could convince myself not to, my voice low as I said, "I saw what you did," and instantly he froze, every muscle locking as if someone had pressed pause on him, and in his stillness I sensed a depth of fear I didn't understand until he finally whispered, "You weren't supposed to," his voice trembling like he'd been hiding this secret his entire life, like exposure meant danger not only for him but for anyone who knew, and I felt my heart clench in instinctive sympathy even though I still couldn't comprehend the truth of what I had witnessed. So I stepped closer softly, telling him I wasn't afraid, that I just wanted to understand, but he shook his head sharply and moved back as if my kindness hurt him, as if he'd been starved of it for so long that even a small expression of concern felt dangerous, and he muttered, "The HOA can't know. No one can know," glancing nervously at the street cameras, the porch windows, the perfectly trimmed lawns that suddenly felt like eyes watching us, listening, waiting to catch him breaking whatever impossible rule he lived under. And when I asked him how plants reacted to him like that, how his whisper could spark life, he swallowed hard, pain flashing across his face before he whispered, "Because they're bound to me," and though the words made no logical sense, something in the weight of them told me it wasn't a metaphor but a truth shaped by years of suffering, of secrecy, of isolation, and I wanted to reach out and tell him he wasn't alone, but he flinched as if even the idea of closeness frightened him. Yet beneath that fear was something else, longing, yearning, a quiet ache like he'd been waiting for someone to see him, really see him, for far too long. And when a gust of wind suddenly rustled the trees overhead, the leaves falling around him like the world itself reacted to his emotions, he whispered urgently, "Please, you have to stay away from me," but the desperation in his voice wasn't rejection, it was protection, as if he knew something I didn't, something dangerous and hidden beneath the perfect suburban calm, and though he turned away as if ending the conversation, I couldn't ignore the pull inside me that said his fear didn't come from what he could do, but from what someone else might do if they discovered the truth. So before he could walk off completely, I said softly, "I'm not going anywhere," and he stopped mid-step, shoulders stiffening, the leaves around us pausing in their fall as if listening, and though he didn't turn I saw him exhale shakily like no one had ever said those words to him before, like he had spent his life believing he didn't deserve to be cared for, and in that suspended breath, in the quiet between us, I knew this wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was the beginning of something dangerous, something magical, something that would either save him or destroy me. But no matter what he feared, I wasn't ready to let go of the boy who could make plants bloom with a whisper. I didn't understand how deeply tangled I had already become in his secret until 2 days later when I found him behind the community greenhouse, sitting on the cracked stone pathway with his head buried in his hands, the plants around him drooping in a perfect circle like they were grieving with him, mirroring his exhaustion. And the moment he heard my footsteps he flinched as if expecting danger, lifting his face with eyes that looked even more tired than the first time I saw him, and though he tried to hide it with a forced calmness I could see the fear trembling beneath the surface, the fear of being discovered, the fear of being punished, the fear of losing control of whatever strange gift pulsed inside him. And when I quietly approached, he whispered, "You shouldn't be here," but this time there was no anger in his voice, only a heartbreaking softness, as if he wanted to push me away for my own sake even though part of him desperately needed someone to stay. And I told him gently that he didn't need to hide from me, that whatever secret he carried he didn't have to carry alone anymore. But he shook his head slowly, the sunlight catching in his hair as he murmured, "It's not about trust, it's about danger." And then he lifted his hand toward a dying vine on the greenhouse wall, barely touching it, and the vine shivered, its color brightening, its flowers opening like they recognized him, like they loved him, and he exhaled shakily as if the simple act drained him, as if giving life meant giving away a part of himself. And I finally understood why he always looked so exhausted, so fragile beneath his calm exterior, because his power wasn't effortless, it was consuming him bit by bit. And when I reached out instinctively to support him he startled but didn't move away, letting me steady him as he struggled to catch his breath, whispering, "The plants take from me when I give to them. That's the bond." And the weight of those words settled on me like cold fog, heavy and frightening because it meant every bloom he created came from his own strength, his own life. And suddenly his fear made sense. If the HOA discovered what he could do, they wouldn't protect him, they would use him, drain him, control him. And I saw the truth in his eyes as he added quietly, "They used my mother the same way," a confession that hit me with a force I wasn't prepared for, because in a single breath he revealed a childhood shaped by fear, by secrets, by watching someone he loved be consumed by the very gift he now carried. And though he tried to compose himself, there was sorrow in him so old and deep it felt like it didn't belong to someone his age. And I sat beside him on the stone path, telling him I didn't care how dangerous it was or what the HOA would think, that I just wanted to help him, that no one deserved to carry that kind of pain alone. But he turned toward me with a haunted expression and whispered, "You don't understand. If you stay close to me, they'll notice you, and the way the word, they, trembled on his lips made me shiver because he wasn't talking about the HOA anymore. He was talking about something else, something older and darker that lived in the roots beneath our perfect neighborhood, something that fed on people like him, something the HOA knowingly protected, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine as the flowers around us suddenly curled inward as if reacting to the fear in his voice, the air growing heavy with the scent of soil and danger. But even with the warning echoing in my mind, I found myself reaching out, touching his hand gently as I whispered, "Then let them notice me." And in that moment something in his expression broke. Fear, relief, longing, all tangled together, because no one had ever chosen him before, and as the vines around us unwound slightly, leaning toward him with a fragile flicker of life, he whispered my name like it was the first hopeful thing he'd said in years, not knowing that choosing him meant stepping into a darkness much deeper than either of us could see. That night everything changed, because the more he tried to distance himself, the more the world around us pushed us closer, until finally he stopped running, stopped warning, and allowed me into the space he had guarded for so long. But with that trust came the truth, raw, unsettling, and far darker than I had imagined, when he led me to the old oak tree behind the HOA's storage building, a place that looked ordinary at first glance but hummed with a strange tension under the moonlight. And he told me this was where the bond had started, not for him but for his mother, that the tree had been planted decades ago when the neighborhood was built, fed with her life, her power, her blood, and that the HOA had learned to control the magic the same way they controlled homeowners, through rules, threats, and fear. And as he spoke the wind shifted sharply, rustling the leaves in a shiver that made my skin prickle as if something ancient was listening, waiting, hungry. And he whispered that every gardener before him had been taken by the same bond, drained until they had nothing left, leaving the HOA free to plant another, and he had survived only because his mother hid him before she died, teaching him to bury his gift, to hide it, to starve it, even though it hurt him to restrain it. And hearing that filled me with anger so fierce I felt my chest tighten, because no one should have to carry a burden like that alone, no one should be punished for a gift they never asked for. And before I could speak he looked at me with a trembling mix of fear and affection and said the part that broke me. "I don't want you to be the reason they find me," because even though he was shattering, he cared more about my safety than his own. But I couldn't step back, not anymore, not after seeing what he had endured, not after realizing that staying silent meant letting him be eaten alive by a system built on exploitation. So I took his hand firmly and told him that he didn't have to hide anymore, that we would find a way to break the bond together. And the shock on his face was so pure, so vulnerable, that I knew no one had ever made him that promise before. Yet the moment our fingers intertwined, the air around us shifted as if the world itself sensed our defiance, the leaves swirling downward, the ground vibrating faintly like something beneath the soil was waking up, and his breath hitched as he whispered, "It's responding to you." Because where the bond had drained him, it seemed to bend toward me with curiosity instead of hunger, as if something in me connected to it too, not with power but with resistance. And though neither of us understood why, he squeezed my hand tightly as if anchoring himself to the only steady thing he had left. And the moment we stepped back from the oak tree, a strange calm settled over the garden, the vines uncoiling around us in a way that felt like acceptance rather than threat. And he turned to me with a look that held more hope than fear for the first time since I met him, whispering, "Maybe I'm not meant to survive this alone." And I told him softly, "You never were," knowing that whatever came next, HOA rules, hidden dangers, ancient roots, we would face it together. And as the moonlit shadows stretched across the silent garden, I felt the truth settle deep inside me like a promise. Real love doesn't run from darkness, it walks into it with someone's hand held tight. And that was our beginning, not our end. Moral lesson: true love isn't about saving someone, it's about standing beside them when the world tries to break them, choosing them even when it's dangerous, and reminding them they never have to face their battles alone.